You're listening to the Light Overtime podcast with David Sargent and Korey Bartos. It is June 23rd, 2024. How are you doing, David?
I can't believe it's June 23rd. This summer's flying by. And I guess summer just technically started. Yeah, solstice was a few days ago. But
it was. I feel like the last couple of times, maybe for sure the last episode, I was like, I keep saying, wow, I can't believe it's so hot or anything like that. But it's like, no, it's middle of June, almost July. It's summer, buddy. It's no longer hot spring. It is literally summer.
I'm good. I'm a little tired. We had a kind of a crazy weekend, but productive and enriching, but it was good.
Cool. Mine's been kind of a slam too, but we got a little bit of shooting done this weekend that we'll talk about, and I got a couple of actual topics this week. It's not as much just talking about our photography, but it'll definitely be intertwined in all of it. So I mean, I'll just jump right in. Yesterday morning we went to, there's a little bird sanctuary close to our place here in Lansing, and for the last few weeks, I think since Elle had a conversation, I think with her mother or somebody else, we've been trying to track an indigo bunting because there is quite a few around here. And we heard one, or Elle heard one originally at her sister's house. And then I was over there and we were trying to find it and couldn't. I mean, all the while, I'm thinking this is like, looking at photos of it in Merlin, I'm like, oh, okay, this is like maybe between a sparrow and a robin. And we'll hear it, and it's like clear that we're hearing it, and we're chasing the call around and stuff like that. And we didn't find it there. And then we decided to go to the this little Hawks Valley trail thing around here, a little bird sanctuary, and we walk around, and we like literally out of the parking lot before we even hit the trail, we hear one. We're like, well, that's serendipitous. And we're like standing outside of the road looking up into this tree, and it's just yelling. It's just yelling its little call. Right. And we're like, we've been staring at this tree. How can we not see this bird? And for like maybe, I don't know, less than 60 seconds, he shoots over and jumps on the power line. And I was like, oh, because he's like literally the size of a baby little house mouse. Yeah. Super tiny bird. Beautiful. Okay. Completely blue, like 3 different tones of blue. Loud as heck for as small as it is. But I snapped a couple of like very okay shots of it. I'm still running the 70 to 200 with a teleconverter, so it's not like I have either the sharpest or the longest. I think even with the 600 of your lens, it would be pretty sharp. But cute little bird, cool bird. Ran around there, saw some tree swallows, saw some black-capped chickadee. I'm sitting here trying to shoot this silly photo of these freaking chickadees, and then this giant kingfisher like yeets himself onto this log next to us and just like squaws at us, and we're like, what in the heck? First of all, those things are like the pterodactyls from Jurassic Park 3.
Yeah,
like they just don't care about anything. It literally was ornery and just like, nah. I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like shooting it, trying to get a good shot. I didn't even realize, because I was shooting in like dark wooded area, my ISO was still at 4,000. I wish I cut it down to like 2,000 because I could have. So stressful because it could have been so much sharper. Then it flies away. I get a couple of shots of it like flying away. And then there was a second one, and they launch off and start flying away. And I get a couple of snaps that are mid at best. But again, that was my first encounter ever with a kingfisher, and I think most people's first encounter is that they see them and don't get a single in focus shot. So
yeah.
I'll take it that he decided to jump in front of me, be like, "What's up, fam?"
Yeah,
it was pretty cool. But we saw a red-winged blackbird just absolutely terrorizing a hawk, which was pretty funny.
They do that. Yeah. Territorial birds.
Yeah, just like he was like, ow, and just like for like a half mile, we just watched this red-winged blackbird like, I don't care, get out of my house. I don't like you.
They'll do it to eagles too. They really are.
Yeah, and I snapped a couple shots, but obviously they weren't good. We just wanted to try to positively ID the hawk, but
yeah,
that was pretty funny. And really nice spot though, really cool, like just barely over a mile hike. It's a shame that I didn't have the rentals yet, because it would have been really nice if we both had a decent camera to shoot that day. But we'll be going back for sure, because it's like 10 minutes away. So
are you gonna have those for this coming weekend?
The rentals?
Yeah.
The rentals should be here Thursday,
Sweet.
and I'll have them for 2 weeks.
Awesome.
This isn't like a huge part of the topic or anything, but I'll at least get it out of the way. I haven't gotten, but I have ordered. I have pre-ordered the Z6III. I pre-ordered it with the 40mm special edition because I plan to probably get a ZF if I like the system enough to keep everything. But a couple of circumstances that we'll talk about later in a different episode when I kind of get everything ironed out is making me kind of just want to jump ship, just like move completely into the full system. I'm sitting here kind of juggling this A7 IV, thinking that I want to keep all this kit for L to have a secondary system and everything like that. But if I can actually save money if I stay on one system at a time. And I think having a ZF with maybe like the Tamron 150 to 500, something a little lighter and not so chunky for L, and then just doing like the 70 to 200, a good prime, and the 180 to 600 that Nikon makes, I think I want to pick up, will be kind of good there. But I'll still be fully evaluating the A9 III with the 200 to 600 and then comparing it to the 70 to 200 with the teleconverter.
Sure.
So I'll figure out what that is. It almost feels a little futile because after these last handful of tests, I know for an absolute fact that the APS-C mode plus the teleconverter with the 70 to 200 is like considerably less sharp when shooting small birds, at least, than the 200 to 600 with, I mean, even if you had like an A7 II, you're going to have, I mean, the autofocus won't be as good, but if you nail focus and you have a dedicated lens, I'm more curious to see if something like the contemporary like Sigma 100 to 400, if that 400 is sharper than using the teleconverter, because that's what the real kicker would be. Like
that's what I'm also more interested in. I know for a fact the 200 to 600 is far sharper than the Sigma I have, and I don't think that's controversial at all.
No, and I'm saying compared to, like, in a world, say I have a 70 to 200 and I'm trying to decide if I should get the teleconverter or buy the Sigma 100 to 400 contemporary, which is only an $800 lens. Mm-hmm. But if you're paying full price, like, the teleconverter is over $500.
Right.
So you could just get a 100 to 400 and have 60 millimeters or 40 millimeters of more range, still be shooting. I'll tell you, it's probably you need to be at 7.1 with the teleconverter for it to be sharp.
Yeah.
So 5.6 not worth it, 6.3 not worth it. You pretty much have to go down to 7.1 or better. Mm-hmm. So, like, at that point, why wouldn't you go with a sharper lens and not put more glass in front of your sensor?
Yeah, that would be the way I would want to do it too.
So, you'd save, a little bit of money probably at the end of the day because you're not taking your super expensive glass out, and you're probably getting sharper results for less weight. Yeah. So it's been hard to gather, but why keep that when I could literally sell the 70 to 200 and the teleconverter by a body and half of a tele lens?
Yeah. Well, that's exciting though. You put an order in. Do you know, I'm sure you've been watching like a hawk with other people out there. Do you know if they're starting to land? Are they getting delivered? Are they shipping yet?
They ship July 25th.
Oh, okay. 2 days as of recording this. Oh,
so,
July, you said.
Did I say July? I might have meant June. I think I meant June 25th.
June? Okay, so 2 days as of recording this.
Yeah, correct. So if I'm lucky, I don't think this is going to be an X106 situation. I mean, the amount of ads for this camera are massive. I feel like Nikon probably made a decent amount of these. This is kind of their like new hotness. Yeah, so
I think they knew what they had in their hands.
Yeah, estimated ship date June 25th. And
Sweet.
So I mean that means I'll probably have it Thursday or Friday.
How convenient.
Yeah, the same time. Currently the 180 to 600 is not in stock, or else I'd buy it. I was considering to see if I could rent it because I'd love to compare it directly to an A9 III. And
you are going to be very busy.
I'm going to be very busy, but it's fine.
If you're lucky, you'll be busy.
Yeah. I think, obviously, the A9 III is a better, like, it's just a better camera. I mean, it's a $6,000 camera or something like that, $5,000 or
Yeah,
$6,000.
yes, I don't think anyone's expecting the Z6III to just be better than the A9 III. There's no.
However, a lot of the primary, if I had an A9 III, I tell you what, I am not shooting 120 frames a second all the time because I'm not going through all those photos. Like I'm not going to be bursting that many photos all the time. So I'd be hindering that a ton. The electronic shutter on the Nikon does do 20.
Yeah.
So I can get 20 frames a second. It's partially stacked, and I can do 1/16,000th of a second. And that 1/16,000th of a second was more important to me than the 120 frames a second of the A9 III. So I'd be very curious to see, like, this freaking Z6III is just spectacular. I cannot believe that's a $2,500 camera.
Yeah.
Like, none of it makes sense.
It's got so much in it that it blew everyone's expectations out of the water, because we were thinking, what if this is a $2,000 camera before we knew any specs? Because we anticipated it being probably something like what the A7 IV is now, maybe, but not even close. Like, even I'm contemplating, like, do I just dump this all and get one of these as well? Because the value in the Z6III, even though $2,500 is not nothing, it's a lot of money. But for the A7 IV, for the Sigma 150-600, for the 20mm 1.8, and for the Sigma 50-1.4 that I have, I could also jump ship and probably grab a decent lens and be happy with it.
Right.
And I'm really thinking about it, because there's some situations that have been frustrating me lately. But it's exciting, though. I will be looking forward to every single story you post and every single message you send me.
Yeah, it's super exciting for me, because birding in general has become a lot less of like kind of a thing I was doing, and now I'm like, I've gotten the hook enough to be like, no, I want to get good at this. Like, I want to be able to like take images every time I go out and at least have one that I'm like, hell yeah, nailed that. Right. And it's going to take a little bit more of like being out regularly and like finding a good spot and posting up and things like that. And I've already been reading a ton and things like that, but we actually have I don't think Kalamazoo had as much like biodiversity as Lansing does. And we had like a lot of trails, but they were all really underwhelming every time I went to them, because they're all just kind of like normal woodland next to farmland trails. Yeah. There's a couple that Elle and I haven't gone to yet that were like okay, but like still, like, we have the ledges and stuff here. We have like this bird sanctuary was like not even on my radar. We went and it's on the side of the road. I was like, okay, how good can this be? And it was a really great little trail next to a little river. It's 10 minutes away. We can do that once a week if we want to. Yeah. And like it's super exciting. So, and obviously we have access to the east side going to Tawas Point and all that stuff like very, very easily. It's not a burden to do that.
And what is that, like an hour for you?
No, it's a little bit of ways, but because her dad has that spot right there, like 10 minutes away, we can just go stay for a weekend and make it happen.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, it makes it really cool. So, now kind of reshaping the last couple of, I would say, months maybe, realizing how much stuff I do for work in my 35mm versus using the 70-200. Before I started this work full time, my 70-200 was always my bread and butter. Yeah. And it's only come out professionally like a little bit, and it's helpful, and like I usually get a banger every time I pull it out, and it's a great lens, but it wasn't getting utilized. Mm-hmm. So if I can kind of get that 24-70, probably set up with primes. I do like faster primes in that range. Yeah. And then get a good, really telephoto. More often than not, when I'm shooting that lens now, it's on the teleconverter, so it's just not doing it justice for $2,800. Right. But yeah, being able to reevaluate the 200-600 I have, try Nikons, try this body. I'm really excited about this body because for some reason, the Nikon brand for me has always just felt like business. Like in my head, I always picture Vince Vaughn's character from Jurassic Park 2: A Lost World with that big Nikon film camera. Yeah. And like, it's just like, if you're serious, you have a Nikon, right? And I don't know, just kind of looking at it and stuff, it's putting me in a totally different mental photography perspective.
Yeah, I think. I mean, as far as like who thinks what Nikon's, the memes often are like wildlife shooters
Right.
shoot Nikons for whatever reason. Landscape and weddings is Canons and whatever. They're the memes. But this body truly is a step in a revolutionary, and I don't use that word very often. But for Nikon, this is one of their most important releases I can think of in a long time.
Yeah.
The Z9 and Z8 were expected. Honestly, this was unexpected.
Yeah.
Equally as important, maybe, but unexpected also.
Yeah.
And
well, it's just that price point, right? And I haven't even talked about the reasons I'm buying this camera. I'm literally still only talking about photography, and I'm a video guy.
yeah,
This camera has every single feature that I've been complaining and wanting from a A7S IV for
Minus
the last
open gate.
year. Minus open gate, but like I'm still getting far more resolution, which makes at least doing something vertical. I'm already not using open gate and pulling vertical extractions from a 16:9, but I can do that at 60p 6K.
Yeah.
And have a ton of resolution.
Yep.
So that's pretty sick. I'm probably going to play with a little bit of internal RAW video. That's really exciting to me.
Yes.
But I wanted 4K 120. When I first switched over and like kind of sold off the A7 R4 and was considering to sell the A7S III, I was like, I don't care that much. I'm used to using a GH5 and stuff like that. I don't care that my 4K 60 isn't full frame. It has been horrible. I've mentioned that on this podcast, I think in the last couple of episodes, that like it actually has been affecting my workflow, needing to go to APS-C mode in 4K 60.
Well, how heavy is the crop on 120? Because I know there is one.
The 4K 120 crop is a DX crop, but I use 4K 60 for like most of my kind of slow motion. So the 4K 60 is full frame oversampled.
Not cropped. Okay, got it.
And it's going to be beautiful. So like I like 120 for something like wildlife might be really cool for 120, and there's some other stuff that might be cool for 120, but like I don't need it.
Yeah, right.
It's a nice to have, so I'm happy to have that over in APS-C DX mode. But I desperately wanted 4K 60 to be full frame, and I just need that. The fact that I can have 6K 30 normal and then I can go up to 6K 60 is insane. The 20 frames a second electronic shutter is epic. I think it does 14 on the mechanical shutter, which is plenty.
That sounds about right.
And like internal RAW is going to be super cool. So
a lot of this enabled at this price point by this, like nobody knew what the heck they were talking about when they announced a partially stacked sensor.
Right. Apparently,
the ability to selectively stack parts of a sensor on this camera, it's like the top 10%, maybe bottom 10% of the sensor are stacked, while the center is a normal BSI sensor. What I heard was that they were able to do this as a cost-cutting measure so that these features like 20 low readout speed are able to come into this body at this lower price point, which I think is just like such a creative way for Nikon to try to undercut the competition, and I think they nailed it.
Well, and you're getting less than 10 millisecond readout speed, which is going to absolutely stomp the A7 IV even.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a quarter of the A7 IV.
Yeah,
easily.
And the A7 IV is like still right today in 2024 hard to beat as like the do kind of anything you need as like a content creating professional-ish type person. Very prosumer, awesome hybrid. Like it's still my standard. That's why like the ZF is still a very good camera to me, because it's basically an A7 IV spec. It's a very solid option.
Yeah.
And this thing is doing all of this above it while being a faster readout speed, which is important to me. Like I do need to have, like I miss having that 12 megapixel A7S III super fast sensor. Like that's going to be great. Obviously I'm going to be able to experience a global shutter here this week, which is going to kind of mess me up a little bit, but I don't know that that's I don't know that that's something that's like super, super critical. And we're talking about, I was expecting to pay for exactly what this has, A7S IV prices, which would have been $3,000. Like it would have been $3,000 or it would have been $3,400, like brand new. Yeah. And that's bananas to me.
Yeah.
There's some things I don't necessarily love about the Nikon lens lineup yet. I'm trying to like figure it out and really figure out where I want to go with like how I'm going to outfit my lens selection.
Yep.
But if you remember, I did all the Philippines trip with a freaking 24-105 f4. So I think I'm pretty close to wanting the 24-120 f4, which I think will be a very good video lens. I'll be shooting a lot more video with this thing. And then I obviously have the 40. The most recent rumor about their next lens is going to be a 35mm f1.4 though. So I think
as it should. Yeah.
And I think I will hold out because that's my bread and butter on my Sony. So I'll feel a little better. I was going to concede and buy their like kind of prohibitively expensive 35 f1.8. It's not expensive, but it's more expensive than I'd want to spend on a 1.8. You know, I'm thinking like a Canon 1.8 is like $400.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a lot to think. It's a lot to chew. It's a lot to kind of figure out. As moving systems is, you just did this barely over a year ago or something. I mean, I guess it's probably like 2 years now, right?
I think it's been like 3.
Wow. Yeah. But I mean, and that was like the big one. That was going from DSLRs to mirrorless. So,
and let me tell you, I still miss that D850 often.
Well, yeah, because the D850 was Nikon's best camera ever made.
I would argue the best DSLR ever made, but that's just me, maybe.
I think I would probably argue that as well. That's still hard to beat. I think I could pick up a D850 today and still very comfortably make incredible stuff. So
believe me, I think about it sometimes.
Dude, especially with some of these prices.
I see the prices, man. I know. The D850 is going for under $2,000 often.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. Like I've seen 1,500 and I'm like, I
saw a kit with I can't remember what lens it had. That was like astonishing that it was under $2,000 with the kit.
Yeah.
With like batteries and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh.
But we're beyond that, and I gotta let it go.
Yeah, I mean, there will be growing pains going backwards too, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the skinny on all that. We're gonna have kind of a comprehensive, try to do a reasonable breakdown of that when I get it all and kind of get it tested, and I'll have some images to share, and I very potentially could make a YouTube video or two about it.
I hope you do.
Yeah,
you should.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So, and then I'll actually get to compare the Sony 40mm f2.5 to the Nikon 40mm f2. And kind of give those a little bit of a head-to-head, because that was my alternative. If I wasn't going to buy this camera and hold out, I was going to kind of go to bopping around with a slightly smaller lens. I've been considering the A7 CR just to have like a second body that 1L could shoot. It'd be 60 megapixels and you could crop that into oblivion.
Sure.
But then I would have like a really small body with a small lens to take around. But now I'm not obviously doing that. I guess this one's really short, so I'll just keep it with gear before I ask you how your weekend was. But I realized I haven't talked about the M3 MacBook Pro.
So I completely forgot.
I'll keep this really, really brief. But I was editing some photos from the Ohio Technical Officers Association from 2 weeks ago, and it dawned on me because I was exporting some Canon T3 files for L. And it was like watching the speed on my PC that has, a 8-core, Intel processor with a 2080 Ti, and it's like a okay mid-tier at this point computer. It was probably 3.5 minutes or something to export like a handful of RAWs into JPEGs. And I exported 58 33 megapixel Sony images on Lightroom into JPEGs. Some of them were in Photoshop and had like some stuff, so there were TIFFs and all that. And it was like saving one photo. It was actually faster than saving one Photoshop file as a JPEG on a PC.
Whoa.
I watched the bar go from 0 to like 60 in 1 second, make one more little jump, and then all 58 images were exported.
That is incredibly well optimized.
It's very fast. And like I took 15 images that I needed to blur some officers' faces out of, and I opened all 15 of them in Photoshop. They basically opened instantly, and I went through. I had to create the action again because I have an action that basically duplicates the base layer, applies the blur that I want, masks it, and then opens up the brush so I can brush on the blurring.
Yeah.
And that was as fast as clicking a tool, and then doing that. And I even did it like 3 to 4 times just to keep intensifying the blur, where I would like obviously save all the layers into a new merged layer and then do that action again on top of it. And I did that at least 3 times on a couple of them. Saved all of those. Those saved quickly. Got through all 15 of them. Exported all of that out within that 58 images, and I did a ton. Like, insane.
Yeah, I don't think this is a news flash, but it would seem to me that Lightroom is more loving the SoC platform from, instead of trying to pull and leverage CPU and then pull and leverage GPU for maybe one task. It's able to pull those things together on the SoC because they're all together.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more easy for Lightroom to do that. It would just make sense to me because you can outfit a Windows PC with very top tier spec and still see people online going, why is Lightroom slow? This is a very, very popular forum topic you'll find since the dawn of time.
Yes.
But it would seem to me that these M1 beyond 2, 3, and then M4 is now in the new iPad Pro, I guess.
Right.
Just released or just announced. So these this SoC platform that Apple has designed and continues to improve seems like the best way to go for Lightroom, at least.
Yeah. Well, and like, let's be clear. So my machine is a M3 Pro. It's 12 core and the 18 core like graphics chip. So it's very solid. It's not just like a base model. It has 36 gigs of RAM, and it has a terabyte of storage. So it's like it's fairly spec'd out. I think on B&H I got it for $2,600. But I mean, I have a 3090 at work and a 12 core processor, and that thing chugs by comparison, and that just blows.
That's what I mean. That's all I mean. Yeah, I believe
it blows my mind because like
yeah.
I was playing around with the M1s when they came out. I had M1 Mac Mini at camp and did a whole summer of photos and video, and I was cutting A7S III 120 footage on that, and that was I can't remember if I got the 16 gig one or not, but it was the base hard drive, so just like 256 gigs. But it was the very first M1, and it was still that impressive. But I didn't expect the M3 to be that impressive. Like, that was like saving a single file, and I just dropped 58 JPEGs into my freaking folder. That's nuts.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And now that I own an iPhone, the in for me to continue growing into that ecosystem is a little bit easier than it was. So I'll be thinking about it.
Yeah,
sure.
well, and like, I don't need this computer. I could have gotten a freaking $1,300 M1, like the spec'd out M1 MacBook Air, and I could have been like crushing photos.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
I have that because I really want to have some good video overhead, but like, this is a beefy system for just photography.
Yeah.
I would go back and get like a barely spec. I would just get like a base M1, maybe an M2 Air if I was like feeling froggy, and then I would just get as much storage and RAM as you think you'll need, because these chips are fast.
Yeah, I'm actually even contemplating just an iPad, maybe the newer iPad, and seeing how that goes, because I have to imagine that if the M3 on your system is running quite like that, the newer M4 on the newest iPad has to be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I was running L's iPad Pro in Europe, and it's not an M anything. It's just pre-M chip.
Oh wow, okay.
But I still had the pencil, and I was running Lightroom, and saving wasn't miraculously fast, but I'd compare it to like my current PCs. Yeah. So it's not like I was angry or irritated. I actually loved the workflow. And I had just this little anchor. It looks like a thumb drive, and that was my card reader. So no weird dongle thing. It just like plug right in the bottom, click, and it worked great. So the only downside to that is if you were doing a lot of stuff, if you wanted like an SSD also, you'd have to get some kind of hub. But I support it because, I mean, I imagine those new Pros, those iPads are probably insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that's most of my current gear woes and talk. How was your weekend? I saw that you got out a little bit and
Yeah, so this weekend, actually for the last week, I haven't done a whole lot of shooting because it has been just torrential downpour almost every day this week. And then Friday, I took most of a day off. I worked, I front loaded my week heavy, so like I was working extra hours most the first 4 days of the week. Then Friday, I worked for 1 hour exactly. I drove beans into the shop. I got everybody set up and I said, see ya, and took Friday and drove my family down to Charlevoix for the weekend. We had a family reunion Saturday for Lisa's side of the family. And then this morning we had a brunch to kind of conclude the family reunion thing. And that was cool, but it still rained through the whole weekend. So I didn't get out a lot, but I did do something. I was hoping, because we were staying in a cabin that Lisa's parents own, that there were some birds that would come near, and every evening and every morning I could hear them very close and very loud. Goldfinch, some sparrows, red-winged blackbirds. There was a multitude of things floating right around us, but the trees that were in front of the back deck that I could shoot off of, not a single bird wanted to come hang on those trees. There was like 6 different types of trees too. They could have been, any one of those birds would have been happy to sit on one of those branches, but no, they wanted to stay way back in the field, like in the tree line that was like 100 feet away. And even though they were loud, I saw no bird at the cabin. So I woke up this morning, that was this morning already, at 5-ish in the morning, I think 5:30 maybe, and got out to Sportsman's Park like I've done hundreds of times in the past. But now it's a little different because they rebuilt the boardwalk at Sportsman's Park. So now there's like a kayak launch, and everything's just newer and I guess better. The only thing I don't like is that they added street lights essentially to the boardwalk, and when you're walking out at 5 a.m, light is pointed at you. And I like to be a little more inconspicuous than that, but whatever. It's cool. At least they're taking care of it. But they did something incredible behind the watershed building, which is only about 100 yards away from this area. They're connected. You walk from one to the other. Behind the watershed building, it's always been kind of like just butts right up against the river, and then if you just kept walking into like the marsh, you'd hit private property. But the city and the watershed building were able to like allocate funds to build out this connected boardwalk that goes from behind there. It goes right into the marsh, right along the river for probably like 300-400 yards over the water, that connects into an established trail system that then goes on for like another mile.
Oh dang.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I walked it this morning because I was like, if I'm gonna do anything, it's gonna see that, because it was a lot of money. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was no small amount of money and effort that went into this, and it was fantastic. I walked it. It was still raining on me a little bit. I only saw red-winged blackbirds, 1 blue heron, and a cat. So I didn't get any fantastic images, but I was really happy to see what the people of East Jordan have access to, and what I'll look forward to visiting again when I eventually come back again, because I know I will. So it was really cool. Didn't get much. I'll look at what I got this morning, because there was a couple things. Oh, I did want to talk about this. I did sit with a bunch of tree and barn swallows for a little while.
Oh, cool.
And you had brought that up, that you were doing this for a little bit. Did you have any time with swallows, meaningful time with swallows?
Yeah, I mean, they're one of Elle's favorite birds, and they're definitely interesting. But tree swallows are beautiful.
Yes.
There was a couple of houses around the bird sanctuary that they were kind of poking their little heads out, which was cool.
Yeah.
But I was sitting with one on top, like perched on the very top of a dead tree for a little while, and then I kind of played with one that was standing on the outside of one of the tree houses. But they're interesting. I posted a photo of one like with its wings outspread as it was like stretching on top of.
Beautiful.
They're wildly beautiful birds.
Iridescent blue, teal.
Yeah.
Really, tree swallows are, and then barn swallows are more like maroon and brown and red and stuff, and they're really beautiful too.
Yeah.
I bring it up because I find them very, very difficult to shoot. I follow on Instagram, I think his name is James Overesh, if I'm saying that correctly, but I'll find it and you can check it out below in the description. His work with swallows in particular, he does a lot of bird in flight, a lot of like waterfowl, but a lot of bird photography. But his work with swallows, I don't know how this dude does it, but he's able to capture them in flight, and it looks like it could be at like 800 mil. And if you could, and like close, I don't know how he does it, but they're sharp, they're perfect. They're these perfect images of tree swallows in flight, and it just confounds me because I tried, and it's probably a limitation between both the Sony A7 IV and the Sigma 150 to 600, but the AF is nowhere near fast enough
to
lock onto a swallow in flight.
I think a huge part of it too is like, one, they're not super common birds, but the thing is, like, somewhere at the bird sanctuary, those swallows didn't mind us at all. So I could have literally kicked out a freaking chair right in the middle of the path, and they'd have been like, "What's up, dude?" I was sitting there just standing, staring at one forever. And there was many around. So I think if like that would be the kind of spot that if I have like the 100 to 600 or the 180 to 600 on the Nikon, guaranteed I can probably knock one out if I chill for a while. Because there was many. There was a very large number. There was 5 at least that I saw individuals.
And that's what like had me thinking a little bit today about, I wonder how the Z6III and the 180 to 600 would perform in this situation compared to this camera, because
they're
I struggled.
They're little jets.
They're very quick.
Yeah.
They're very quick.
They're cool
and
because
they're agile. Like change direction very, very quickly. And so if you want it coming at you, you know, you got to sit there for an hour or something and try over and over and over again. So I'll link to you James's work, and you can check out for yourself.
For sure,
like,
I'd love to see it.
What he does, because I could only aspire to be a tenth as good as the type of photographer he is with those kinds of birds in particular. So I did sit with tree swallows. I probably got a few tree swallow shots I do like, probably some of the favorites from this morning, and I almost forgot. I witnessed osprey. I don't see them very often, but osprey, they hover way high up, probably, you know, a couple 100 feet up in the air, and they'll hover like unlike any other bird. Instead of like an eagle where it may circle or do some kind of circling path to like check out a source for food, osprey will sit there and just flap its wings and hover in one spot. And that's really cool because, you know, he's probably looking at something, but he never dove. So I've always wanted to catch a shot of osprey diving into the water, because I've seen it once and they're violent when they do it, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, out in the Eastern Shore where my dad lives, when I very, very first started shooting birds, I actually shared a couple shots with Elle like last weekend. Right on the wharf there's tons of osprey, and it's like many, because obviously it's a little bit more it's like brackish water. There's a ton of different types of fish, and it's super easy to fish there. I only have one of it perched and like eating a fish like in a tree, and this was back when I had the GH4 and I was using the Metabones, and I had rented a Canon 100 to 400 L series lens. And then I have a couple of it on one of, like, not a buoy, but one of the like the posts that have like boat like guides on it or whatever. There's a big osprey nest, and it's like one osprey kind of chilling and one with its wings out, like batting a little bit because it was landing in a nest. And I mean, those are stellar shots. But yeah, very, very cool birds. I'd like to go, now that I would consider myself someone who has dabbled in bird photography. I think going back to the Eastern Shore is going to be a lot more fun, because I know that there's a lot of wildlife there, like within walking distance of my dad's house, where I can get some really cool shots.
Yeah. So that was that was the extent of all of my shooting for the last week. Actually, pretty much what I did this morning.
Nice.
So you're caught up with me.
Yeah, that's cool though. I am curious though, what autofocus setting do you frequently use for the A7 IV?
So often it is the medium tracking box. I don't let the A7 IV use wide unless I'm in a very static position, and I'm like, it has to be a real static situation for me to want to let the autofocus choose where to look. But usually it's the medium tracking box,
Mm.
and so I'll just keep it in the center for the most part, and then find the bird, hit the tracking AF, and just try to get it to stick on the bird that way. And normally that works. Sometimes I'll switch it to the center fix, and then do the focus and recompose and refocus that way inside the center fix, because then it still will do bird AF inside of the center fix, which is nice too, so that it doesn't try to choose from anywhere in the frame, which sometimes works better, but I bop back and forth. I do find it difficult to pick one, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. I've been using whatever the expanded spot tracking focus is, which has been my favorite. I've had the best luck with it actually like fixing onto the bird that I want. But for some reason, the last couple of times I went out, I don't know if I just had difficulty, but it's been kind of sluggish, and I'm really curious because I'm not super familiar with it, but from what I've gathered, the 3D tracking mode on the Nikon stuff is kind of like really sick on the last couple of bodies. So
okay, I hope they've improved it, because when I used to use it for like weddings and stuff on the D850. Back then, it was nothing to brag about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about recent as like Z8 and Z9, not
good. Yeah.
Like,
well, actually, they took away 3D tracking for a while, and then only recently brought it back. I don't know if it's even on the Z9, to be honest with you. It might be.
I could just be misspeaking for whatever their like one tracking mode is, but it looks pretty impressive from what I've seen. Again, I don't know all the nomenclature for the Nikon stuff because I never really shot it very much.
There was some controversy about them taking out the 3D tracking, because that's what, when asked, because AF has been a concern for Nikon versus the other brands for a long time now. When asked, often the Nikon reps would say, you should be using 3D tracking for this scenario and this scenario.
Sure.
And then for whatever camera it was, and I could be wrong, but I thought it was the Z9 where they took it out. That was a big controversy, because it was like, well, you guys have been saying use 3D tracking. Where is it? And they didn't have a good answer for that. But then they put it back in, and it might be back in the ZF and the Z6III now. I'm not sure if it's the Z8 and the Z9 where it's gone, but they did take it out of a major camera.
Yeah, I mean, I'll obviously be looking into it quite a bit, because I will be using this stuff. But
I mean, if they took it out to work on it and then re-implemented it as a better version of it, great. I would look forward to seeing results from that.
Yeah, for sure. I assume by now that, you know, I've only heard the people that truly enjoy the Z9 and Z8 have basically nothing to really complain about. Where it's like, no, I mean, they've done the thing. They're now in the mirrorless race. I have to assume that it's probably still better than Fuji, and I still think Fuji's focus pretty well, but they're enough not as good as Canon and Sony that people will say, well, you know, it's not great. But like I've used, I had an XC4 and I was like, the focusing on this is pretty freaking good. So I guess for what I'm doing, you know, I started picking up a little bit of sports and wildlife now, and that's a little bit more challenging than normal shooting. But we'll definitely see, and I'll be.
Before we leave the topic of the Z6III, I don't know if you intended to or not. The viewfinder being over 5 million dots and 4,000 nits brightness is mind-blowing. Nobody even asked for that, really. And Nikon was like, screw it, we're going to give it to you. And what are we supposed to expect? Every camera going forward now has a viewfinder as good as the Z6III?
Right.
I hope so.
I don't even know how to feel about it, because like I've just been kind of... I went backwards with my viewfinder, and I'm just happy to have one. Frankly, like there's been a lot of cameras that I really wanted that I didn't get because they don't have a viewfinder, and like I shoot in the direct sun, and I'm not going to carry external monitors with me all the time. Like I'm doing photography. I don't want to have all that stuff. So I'm excited because it's very controllable. I don't have to have it at 4,000 nits, but if it's really gnarly and I want it to, it will be helpful. It gets kind of challenging on these like really sunny days shooting birds looking into the A7 IV. So
that, and the option to magnify and look at the detail in what is essentially double the resolution of that viewfinder over most other cameras in this price range is a nice to have, because
Yeah.
I'd rather not have to flip out the LCD screen and look and chimp like that if I don't have to.
Yeah, Jordan Drake of Petapixel said he doesn't feel like he has to punch in and magnify to manual focus video with it.
That's incredible.
And I went, I'm not even going to let myself get excited until I see it, because that's crazy. And he's like, he's very in my camp of like, I'm a video guy who does not want to relinquish my EVF because I use it all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So that's a killer spec. I have already bought, I actually placed the order yesterday, a spare battery. I got an M42 to Z mount so I can use my old vintage glass with it. And then I bought a CF Express Type B card, because obviously I'm going to need that to take advantage of the internal RAW and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't have, even my V90 cards I don't think can handle it. So yeah, I'm super ready, super excited. We will be talking in depth when it happens, and I'll try to have really, really good notes for when we have another show.
I am really looking forward to that.
Yeah, so I did have one topic, and I don't know that it's maybe even a long topic or if it's a short topic or if there's like a lot to it, but I want to know your take on it, because I know you'll have something. So I'm just getting into birds. Obviously, we talked a lot about that. And, you know, I process my images a decent amount. I always have. I enjoy it. That's why I like to shoot RAW. And because my Instagram Explorer has become so much more wildlife photography, there's these incredible images all over the place. Like, I feel bad for somebody picking up like a mid-range camera and like dabbling barely and hoping that they're going to have a following on wildlife, because you're not. It's just not going to happen, because the people doing it have, you know, the 800 and 400 and 600 primes, and their images are insane. That does not mean it's not worth doing. Instagram is not, it does not matter, and no one cares. You should be exploring this photography. It's so fun. It's so good. I get better every single time I do it, and it's been a freaking blast. But then there was a couple of posts I saw. I wish I saved them. Maybe I have them. I think I sent one to Elle, so I can definitely pull one up. And it was like a before and after of a, I don't know which type of hummingbird it was, but it was an incredible looking hummingbird. It actually might have been a blue and orange kingfisher too, but it was a beautiful bird, very vibrant bird, and the edit was spectacular. And then I swiped, and it was like the raw file, and I was like, okay, so my photos are not far off. Like, the quality of my photo that I'm taking is actually quite good, but there's stuff like Topaz AI, and there's all of these editing tools that can make these so punchy and sharp and clear.
Yeah.
And then they do a ton of masking to edit their background completely separate of the subject, and they make it really like milky and as though there was nothing behind it, and it was the most perfect, beautiful. And it was really jarring, because I wasn't sure if, you know, it's hard to tell on some of them, because some of them are really heavy-handed. Some of them are really well done to where you would never know that they did a ton of Photoshop. But it's becoming more clear that a lot of the like rare small bird, high-quality photographers are doing like crazy processing to their images.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what your personal preference is as far as this goes, but I can tell you for the majority of my favorite shots, I do mask the background. I mask the subject. I have a particular process, and I'll explain it actually. What I like to do is make the bird a little more punchy, a little more texture, a little more clarity, a little more depth. So highlights up a little bit, shadows down a little bit, preserving all the detail, but just make the bird a little bit more punchy. And then I'll inverse the mask on the bird. And then I have this filter that I did use for weddings for a long time, that I just happened to use on a wildlife photo for one shot at one time years ago, and I've stuck with it. It's essentially dehaze down like 25, so it's real misty looking at that point. Clarity down, texture down, and then a touch of warmth up, not much. And then brightness up just a little, exposure up just a little bit. And so it's like almost that I don't want to say light and airy look, but I call it warm soft glow. That's what I call it, and that's what it is. It just adds a warm soft glow. But what you do in the contrasting to the mask that I put on the bird, that really makes the bird pop. It really makes the background not necessarily disappear, but it smooths out the background quite a bit. You don't lose all your context. Like it doesn't suddenly look like you shot it at like 1200 mil and there's no background.
Right.
But it definitely makes the subject pop, especially helpful when the scenery is a little bit busy, but you give yourself enough to work with where that really takes it a step further. And we can talk about like where that threshold is, where what's heavy-handed and what's just really well done, because maybe you could go back now that I've told you and you could probably guess which ones I've done that to.
Sure.
But beforehand, why do you care, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm pretty good at seeing like what people are doing for the most part in edits. And generally I don't mind. Like, I'm not like, wow, I can see that they did that. Like, no, because it's good edits. Like, I do a ton of I mask almost every foreground of all of my photos and drop the exposure on them. And a lot of the times if I have a really hard side light, I will almost always pump up the side light with a little bit more warmth and with a little bit more highlights. Like, I do some of that, what I would call heavier handed editing, where it's very stylized and it's not exactly what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like what I would used to do for weddings.
Yeah.
Like just make it look glowy and inviting and warm.
But I mean, the stark dichotomy between what comes out of the camera and some of these like ridiculously colorful birds and stuff, all I was noting really was that I do believe without the background I have in editing, and you know what I mean? Because I'm not like a new photographer that wants to start with birds.
Oh, sure. I see where you're going.
I'm a very experienced editor getting into birds and going, what's going on here? And then seeing that and going, oh, I think it creates an unrealistic expectation for what like your good bird photos are. Because I probably have some that I overlooked because I thought they weren't salvageable or weren't like super good, because I was like, oh, well, my ISO's a little high. I don't know that I can really get this as vibrant and punchy as I want. Maybe it's a little busy. And I just like overlooked it for something that was a little easier. And maybe it was even a less cool bird. Maybe it was a more rare bird. And I was like, I wish that was better. So I went and edited some freaking blue jay because it's like sharp.
Yeah, I see your take on this and I totally agree. It does put a certain, I guess, almost negative connotation when a photographer's not quite forward about exactly what they might be doing if they are being very heavy-handed with their editing. I know that for me, it feels good to talk about it.
Yeah.
And like, if there are new photographers listening or watching this podcast, be sure that you can do whatever you want to your photo and be the artist you want to be. And if you don't want to do a whole lot of editing, you can still feel good about your photos because they're unique to you. What you can do also is look at Ray Hennessy's work. I've talked about him before. He's done reels recently where he'll take you through the editing process, and they're like 60 seconds of his mouse just clicking, and you can see exactly what he did. And he's not super heavy-handed as an editor goes, but he does do pretty good work with what he's got, and he starts with fantastic images in the first place because he's using a Z9 with, you know, the nice primes.
Yeah, the freaking 800 6.3 and like...
Exactly. Yeah, so he's got great images to start with. So don't get me wrong, he's working with like $30,000 worth of gear, but you don't have to be heavy-handed. But if you are, it's okay to feel like that's okay. So I think transparency, authenticity, and honesty. When someone asks, I'll tell them exactly what I do.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I completely agree with that. I just like, it's really overwhelming to see so many amazing images because
definitely I remember feeling that way.
Bird Instagram is crazy, bro.
It really is.
I was so proud of my freaking Anna's hummingbird video, and then I see everybody else's hummingbird video, and I'm like, wow, I freaking blew it. Like,
here's another side of that topic is wildlife photographers versus wildlife photographers who are shooting wildlife in a zoo, and they don't say so. Yeah. And so you're seeing images of these tigers coming right at the lens of a photographer, and they're not saying that they were in a zoo. They might just let you think they were on a safari. Right.
Yeah. If you're not sure and you've never done it, if you're at 600 mil shooting through a fence, you cannot see the fence.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you can get really good at editing that photo to look like you met a tiger.
And here's another hint for you. If you're following a page and you're not sure if they're a very authentic photographer, if they didn't specifically can tell you the story of how they got that tiger shot, it's probably fake or probably from a zoo.
Yeah, or they just took it off the internet, which is even sadder.
Yeah, it's one of those scenarios.
Yeah,
so look for the people who are being authentic and truthful and telling you the stories of how they got the shot, because those are the people worth following and talking to.
Yeah, and to be clear, if you're taking photos of wildlife at the zoo, sweet, because it's cool as heck, and hopefully it's...
I've done it too. I have.
Hopefully it's an ethical zoo, and I'm sure you probably have a lot going on. You're not going on safari. But
exactly,
like, you don't have to hide the fact that you're shooting at a zoo. Just like try to get cool photos and talk about the animals, and like maybe spread some information about the animals, and then your content is still good and valuable. Like
exactly. And when I did it, I went to the Garland Zoo in the UP once. I think I must have shared like 40 photos that I took, because it's, yes, you're looking at new subjects every time you turn your head, and you can't stop yourself. And they are happy to let you shoot. Every time I posted one of those 40 whatever images, I hashtagged zoo like however many times I could, just to make it clear this was in a zoo. Yeah. I didn't really have to put any effort into shooting this. This was just here, So just be authentic.
Yeah, and it's made me really want to start really tracking the species of bird that I've seen, and like I think it's just a cool thing. I didn't think that I'd get as interested in like really wanting to get quite good at it. I thought it was going to be like a secondary, like this is kind of fun because I like hiking and being in the wilderness. And now I'm like, nah, dude, I drank the juice. I gotta figure out how to get better at this yesterday.
I gotta jump in the deep end now.
Yeah, it's fun. So I have one more thing that you had primed me on, actually, and I'd like to end the show on this one, which was, I'm curious as to why you asked, but you said, hey, you have $2,000 to buy a camera and a lens to start from scratch today. He messaged me randomly and he's like, just think about that for the show. And I was talking to somebody on Instagram like 2 hours before that, and they're like, hey man, I think they said that they had like a $1,500 budget. And I was like, I'll give you some options for that, but you're really going to want to probably be at about $2,000, and here's why. And so I want to know the story of why that came up, what yours would be. And then I actually have 3 setups for, I have a video first hybrid, a photo first hybrid, and a full frame that I would probably do today if I was, and if it had to be bought new, so it wasn't like going used and trying to get like some scrappy stuff.
So here's why I feel terrible, because this came about, someone posted in a Facebook group for like Western Michigan photographers or something like that, in one of the groups I'm in, asking this question. And they didn't put the budget, so like they went through like what they shoot, and then I was like, at the time I had a bunch of time and I was ready to like start Googling and getting into every little configuration I could. And then I asked them before I started doing that, like, hey, what's your budget? And then I got busy and then I completely forgot, and I asked you because I was like, let's compare it, that'd be sweet. And then I had all this stuff to do on the weekend, so I completely forgot that I even asked you this. So I'm really glad you've got all these configurations to explain to me, because then I can just relay it back to this lady.
Oh man, well that's less fun, but we can get into it.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so I'll just break it down because we're gonna end this episode on this note. But if I was to do video first today and I didn't have any system and I wasn't really familiar with the system, you can get an A6700 with a Sigma 18-50 f2.8 for a little bit less than $2,000. And as far as the APS-C only lenses go, it's really, really hard to beat Sigma's 18-50. You're getting the fastest you can get at a zoom. Any other like Sony APS-C zooms in that range are going to kind of be a variable zoom like starter lens. And in video, it's paramount that you have like a fixed aperture. Like you're going to change your exposure when you zoom and stuff like that, and that's just not going to be good for like a new videographer. The A6700 kind of has all the tech and maybe a little bit more than the A7 IV. So it's really, really hard to beat. You're talking, $1,900, maybe $2,000 with tax or whatever, and you have really as good as you can get, while still having an incredible photo camera. And this was without knowing exactly what you're going to shoot. Obviously, if like you want to shoot wildlife, that's going to be a lot tougher. You're going to have to look at like whatever the cheapest telephoto you can do is. The A6700 has IBIS, so you could probably get away with being pretty strategic with how you want to shoot those lenses, but that was kind of where I landed. My photo first hybrid option was actually going to be the Sigma 18 to 50 millimeter again, but on a Fuji X-T50.
Oh, wow.
You're a little bit under the $2,000 mark, but you have, as a first time photographer person, there's a bunch of it has all their best film simulations. It still shoots incredible video if you want to do that sometimes, but it's got a beautiful 40 megapixel sensor. You're going to have honestly, you'd be if you're not making good images with an 18 to 50 f2.8 on that Fuji, you're just not going to get good images because it's good. Like all cameras are so good now. So in both of those two systems, I would be perfectly happy being photo or video first, but they just kind of lean, maybe even 60-40 one way or the other. So I wanted to frame that because it was hard for me, frankly, to choose. Right. As a full hybrid, I think I'd probably still go with the A6700 because I'm currently a Sony guy and I'm really comfortable with it and I know where it can go.
Right.
But more surprisingly, I was looking at the Canon R8 again.
I was just going to say that.
And especially because if it was, again, just like normal stuff, maybe some portraiture or things like that, you didn't really know exactly what you're shooting, but you wanted to get into photography for less than $2,000, for I think actually like a decent, probably the cheapest out of the three, I think, if I remember correctly. It's been a few days since I got these together. You can get a Canon R8, the RF 35mm f1.8, which obviously I have a bias. I really enjoy a 35mm lens. You can shoot pretty much all normal life on a 35mm. It's sick. And it's full frame, so you could punch in if you wanted to, and have like a 50, just over 50 with the Canons. They have a 1.6 crop, which is weird, random, and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also have this really interesting 24 to 50 mil f4.5 to 6.3, which is tiny. Which I do believe that if you're new to photography and you're used to using your phone, if you go right into a system that has a big ass lens, you're just not going to take it with you places. And you're just not going to see exactly how much better just having a raw photo from a full-size sensor. Even an APS-C full-size sensor is massive compared to a cell phone sensor. So you're going to get beautiful images. And the 18 to 50, tiny lens. The 35-1.8, tiny. The 24 to 50 f4 to 6.3, tiny. And I think once you kind of start wrapping your head around exactly what it is the camera is doing better than your phone, and you like it, you'll like using a camera. There's some things that a phone I think legitimately does better than a camera for someone who isn't trying to be fully invested in the photography workload. Like if you want to do nice little sky photos and like little like landscapes and stuff, but you don't want to process your images at all and you just want to like share it really fast to social, the HDR and stuff from these iPhones and Samsungs and all that are so good. People regularly get landscape photos that I wish I took on my photo, like on my actual camera, and it would be kind of a lot of work and a lot of experience to edit a landscape to look that good because they just do so much automatic processing. But if you really wanted to figure out what the difference was, those are right now really, really compelling systems and all relatively new for their system and their company. You'd be crushing it with any of those.
Yeah. I had given this thought at another point in time, probably weeks ago, and I just completely forgot that I did think about this. Not particularly with a $2,000 budget, but it makes a lot of sense. The Canon R8, I just quickly Googled, you can have it for $1,200. Then
doesn't even make sense. Crazy.
Right. If you can have it for $1,200. The Nifty 50 for $200. I think is at one point the 1.8 is $200 new, or is that refurb?
Yeah.
New, and then you can also get the 24 to 105 for like $400 or $500.
Yeah, that's the one that's like
the
F4.
STM.
Yeah, it's the one that goes to like F7.1 at the long
Right, and so
end.
you have a nice zoom that covers a good range, and if you're just starting out, that's fun to play with, whatever. And then you have a nifty 50 to shoot people with if you want to do some portraiture. And I think honestly that keeps you well under 2,000, a couple $100 under 2,000. You've got a couple of, you know, good SD cards or whatever. That's decent glass to just gauge your interest. You're under your budget. It was hard for me to think of any other way to get started with $2,000 even.
Yeah. My mom is running the 24-105 STM, and it's definitely good. It's sharp. I took some shots of like buildings from afar in France that I really liked, that I posted to my stories and stuff. Anything that was telephoto from that trip, if you saw it, was literally that lens. So it was at f7.1 or f8. And that's
wonderful.
And it was great. It was really cool to have, and it's pretty small.
And I'm glad I remembered that, because now I can put that in the comment thread with some honesty.
Yeah, for sure. But it's stellar. I mean, it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, but you have a full frame camera for $1,200.
And it is good. Like the readout speed is fast. And what is it, 40 frames per second? Like nobody's spending $1,200 on a full frame entry level camera.
They don't even know what they're doing with
that spec. But they're getting it.
Yeah.
Like Canon was just like, here you go. Do wildlife photography with this thing.
I think they were trying. I think they thought if they didn't have it do that, not having a mechanical shutter would have felt stupid. And because
maybe
one of the really nice things about a mechanical or an electronic shutter is that you can just let it go, because you're not letting it rip with with mechanics. So they're like, okay, well, let's give them some freaking, like, there's going to be enough people that are like, well, I still need a mechanical shutter. We're going to lose those guys, but we could probably get some of them who don't know better. Not to not know better. It wasn't like they were being shady, but they're like, no, let's give them a little something to make it worth not having that mechanical shutter.
Well, it helps when the readout speed is pretty freaking fast on that camera.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, if I had a sensor that was capable of it, and then they were like, oh yeah, but it's still only 10, but it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, that would have felt stupid. Like like your high-end cameras do what, 3 times that or whatever. They could shoot 120 and all that, and they're like trying to like give me 30, but they give you freaking 40. That's nuts. It's a good camera. Good thing. Really interesting though, because I actually put some good thought into that. Like I'm
glad you did.
Because I'm between systems right now, so I was like, okay, well, what if I just like lost it all and I had to buy something right now to get like some work done. And I think I could do a lot. 18 to 50 is going to be a 28 to 70-ish focal length, and you could crush. And those cameras are actually super dope. The XT50 is pretty expensive, unfortunately, but because the XT30s were, I think, $300 cheaper than that model. But
do you think, a little bit off topic, but on the topic of Fujis, and maybe that one in particular, I don't know, do you think for non-photographers who maybe just have fun shooting pictures with their phones, if they were to jump into that system or that lineup, do you think that would overwhelm them with that kind of a camera, with the way that it's set up and the dials and like film sim?
I don't know. The XT50 is a little bit in between like an XT model, like an XT5 4 model, and like the XS10, and their XS10 XT200s were like the video centric ones that looked more kind of like a standard mirrorless. It's kind of splitting the difference there. They really designed the XT50 to be kind of a beginner camera, a more entry level but serious entry level. So maybe not, but I think people that are trying to buy a real camera are going to have a pretty big like jarring moment, like culture shock, once they realize that stuff is a thing. If you're just used to pressing the circle button on which lens you want in your iPhone. And even then I'm shooting most, if not anything that I post into my story, is being shot fully manual in Lightroom on my iPhone. So I rarely, unless it's just a snap for something stupid, use Apple's camera. And I mean, now for video, I'm probably going to check out their Final Cut camera or whatever they just released, which is a whole other thing to unpack. That we'll talk about
I know
later,
nothing about that, and I'm sure I'll figure that out, but it sounded like something wild. So
all I know is that it gives me more control, and it's Apple native. I don't love all the experience I've had with the Blackmagic camera, which is what I use for video on it now.
But
yeah, anyway, fun, very gear heavy, but I still think more better than just rumors and just talking shop. I think it would be helpful to some people. So
Yeah.
a good little change up. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please let me know what you liked. If you hated it and you think it's stupid and we're dumb and we should just talk about birds more, I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know. Thanks for listening this far. Please leave us a review if you haven't before and you're liking the show. Share this with your friends. We are on all of the podcast apps for listening. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I wave to you right now. Thank you for watching. It takes not an enormous amount of time to make this show, but David and I are pretty busy guys, and we try to make time to talk about this stuff, or else we'll go crazy. So help us not go crazy and support the show.
Hey, also, just so you can't get mad at us that we didn't talk about it, there were 2 new film cameras released. 2 new film cameras. One of them is not even instant. Pentax made a new film camera, and Fuji made a Instax wide camera. There you go. We don't have to talk anymore about it. See you later, guys.
The Instax wide is still auto. That's lame. Should have had more control. And the Pentax is $500. You should just go get a K1000 for $40 and get M42 glass. It's sweet. Anyway, bye guys.
Bad value. Oh, also, well, you get support though. See you later. Bye.
Later.